In terms of being able to blow something up, Hell Let Loose just got a new weapon to add to the pile of what can do that. The Self Propelled Artillery, or SPAs for short. These assault gun tanks, as I'll also refer to them by, are new artillery tanks designed to deliver much needed firepower at shorter ranges and to change the artillery meta as a whole to add some variety to the game. And in this video, we're going to talk about all the changes to artillery and what you need to know about self-propelled artillery, the static artillery, and just changes in general in under 10 minutes. Now, this is primarily also a guide video. So we'll be talking about the different loadouts and just the 3-man artillery class in general that you can run, the static or stationary artillery and how they work, and the new self-propelled artillery. Starting off, we're going to talk about the new artillery squad and what's in it and what it consists of. Now, reference. There is only 2 squads that you can produce of artillery. So only 6 people at any time can play artillery, essentially, in 2 squads. Starting off with the artillery observer, which is essentially your squad leader. These guys have fully automatic or semi-automatic weapons. They have anti-personnel mines, grenades, a hammer, binoculars, and even a flare gun for both their loadouts. These guys are the ones that talk to command chat. They communicate what you need to do. And again, they're just the commander in charge of said squad. Next, you have the artillery engineer, which in all intents and purposes is basically just the same engineer from infantry put over to artillery. These guys can build barbed wire, hedgehogs, barricades, nodes, you name it, they can build it. The only things they can't build are things for the new mechanics loadout that the tankers have. So they're just simply put a regular engineer. Their second loadout, which is usually a pioneer or sapper, is basically the same thing as the next level loadout for the regular engineer, minus a satchel. They have a blowtorch, though, as an add-on since they are technically a vehicle crewman. But other than that, they're basically just an engineer for artillery. And lastly, we have the artillery support, which, like the engineer, is essentially just the same thing as the regular infantry support player, just for artillery now. This is so if you need to build artillery cannons, which we'll get to later in the video, this is the guy you call on to help you build on them. They also can level up to get the ammo carrier class, which means they can have ammunition boxes on top of their 50 supply box. For those wondering what their emblems look like, here's what they look like. Just a little sidebar. Now that we've gotten the 3 roles out of the way, let's talk about the static artillery first, as they're arguably the more simplistic of the 2. The static artillery or stationary artillery is the artillery pieces you can build using 50 supplies. This is where your support player comes in, or commander-based supplies if for some reason you need supplies. You can now build these artillery, and they are destructible by the enemy team. You have 50 HE rounds and 35 smoke rounds, so you now have limited ammunition. To refill your ammunition, the commander has to use a call-in called artillery resupply. This costs 150 munitions. So, if you're not being effective, or the commander isn't talking, you might not be able to get refilled. Keep that in mind when using your ammo. Make now, sure the effective range of the static artillery pieces is 1,600 meters, which Team 17 have talked about nerfing to 1,400 meters in previous dev briefs and just other little patch notes. That has not happened yet, and so this part is subject to change, but as of this video's recording, the effective range of the static artillery is 1,600 meters. Now, how do you actually use the artillery? Well, once you're in the artillery squad, any one of the 3 people in your squad can use the static artillery. You have one guy who essentially is the gunner, and one that is the gun turner and loader. The loader and gun turner helps the gunner actually aim the gun, as you have very little mobility to actually traverse the gun as the gunner, and the gunner, well, pulls the trigger. Now, if you see on your left, you'll see a table of mills and distances on the far left. Now, this is a table that breaks down in 100-meter increments what mill or aim that you have to hit something with the artillery. And the bottom right of your screen, on top of your ammunition and positions, you have the elevation of your gun in mils. You use that number to put what you want. So if you need a target at, say, 1,400 meters, you need 670. Now, if you need something At 1550, you want to take 646 minus 622 and then divide that, and that should get you relatively the middle of what you need, in this case 1550 for the example. Now, there are calculators out there. I will leave links down below in the description if you want to be really accurate with your artillery fire. But once you get good at it, you can kind of eyeball it. But that is at least how you use the aiming of the guns and actually fire the guns. And as you saw, you do have limited ammunition. Now, artillery now, compared to previous updates, can be taken out fairly easily. So, if you are going up to them, you can actually disable them like you're disabling a garrison. And once you kill the crew, you can go up there, and it'll take relatively 10 seconds to destroy a howitzer. Now, once you destroy said artillery, it'll take 5 minutes to recuperate or cool down. That means the artillery crew cannot rebuild the gun until 5 minutes has passed after the gun has been destroyed. Now, other testing I did do with this is that it takes 2 rockets to destroy a artillery piece. It takes 2 armor-piercing rounds from lights and recon tanks, as well as 1 HE round from the same vehicles. I didn't test mediums or heavies. That's kind of impractical, but there's that. Now, in terms of how long it takes from a shell from once you fire it to when it lands, it is 25 seconds. No matter what distance or what shell you fire, it takes 25 seconds. So keep that in mind when trying to fire close to your troops, as they could advance and then you'll get friendly fire, and then you'll have some very pissed off people maybe trying to vote kick you. Just be wary when firing your friendlies that there is essentially, in simplest terms, a 30-second delay between a shot you fire and when it hits the ground. Now, one little sidebar about the artillery is that each faction is different with their artillery, but the principles are exactly the same. In terms of this, I mean how much you need to aim up or down for the different levels of distance. For the British artillery, you'll have to make the least amount of adjustment, as there's the least amount of distance between each of the 1600, 1500, 1400 increments. And the Russian artillery is also slightly different, and also the gun is able to traverse a lot faster up and down compared to its other counterparts. So just little other things to keep in mind. But we're going to move on to the self-propelled artillery, or SPAs. The SPAs, or self-propelled artillery, is simply put assault guns. They are essentially tanks that have howitzers strapped to them that are used to blast enemies from a distance with a lot more explosive power, at least compared to other tanks and actual armored vehicles in Hell Let Loose. Now, each country has a different assault gun, and there is some slight differences between them depending on what country you are. For the Russians, you get the KV-2. For the Americans, you get the M4A3 105mm tank Sherman. For the main German faction, the Sturmpanzer IV Brombaur. For the main British faction, the Churchill AVRE. For the German Deutsches Afrika Korps, you get the Panzer III Offs N. And for the British 8th Army, you get the Bishop self-propelled artillery. Now, as you notice, some of those tanks have turrets, and some of them don't. That is really the main difference between them. And with the British Churchill AVRE, they are a heavy tank, which we'll get to as we talk about these assault guns. But most of them have turrets, which is a big thing. So that's at least the main difference. However, in terms of overall firepower, they are mostly the same, which we'll get into all the little details with now. Now, I've put in front of you some stats. Let's break them down. Obviously, at the top, you've got the titles of all the vehicles. Let's start off with the yaw rate in degrees per second. This simply means the traverse rate from right to left that the gun can traverse at what speed. In this case, 4 degrees a second, which is pretty slow by normal tanker standards. But that's at least what that means. Next, we have the maximum allowed yaw. This means how much can the turret or hull lock tank actually can traverse its gun. For the Sturmpanzer, it's 30 degrees, which means from one side to the other, you can only go 30 degrees. The rest, except for the Bishop, is a 360 degrees, so it means it can go full 360 around the tank. And for the Bishop, it's 8 degrees. That means 4 degrees to the right, 4 degrees to the left. So not much there. Now, let's get into pitch rate, pitch angle minimum, pitch angle maximum. Pitch rate, if yaw meant side to side, pitch angle means up and down. Essentially what this means is it can go up 1 degree a second. This is across the board for all of the vehicles. And the pitch angle essentially is the gun elevation and depression. The minimum being it can go a minimum of 5 degrees down. And in this case, for most of the vehicles, they can go 30 degrees upward, or they can point 30 degrees up in the air. Now, let's get into more of the easy ones, the health of all the different components. The hull, which is essentially the health of the tank itself, or the artillery tank in this case, and most, except for the Churchill, have medium tank health, around 900. Now, what does this mean? Against infantry, you can take 3 rockets in most of these vehicles, unless you're in the Churchill, which you could take 4. Against heavy tanks, you can be 2-shot if they hit the hull both times. Medium tanks can essentially 2-shot you as well. In terms of turret, mobility, and engine block, these are different components that help your operation, and they can be also targeted. But they may not always contribute damage to the hull itself. Only after certain things are destroyed can they be damaged, minus tracks, of course. Those can continuously be damaged and will not affect the actual health of the hull. Now, if you don't tank too often, you want to know where these health bars are. They are located towards the bottom of your screen, right by your tank clock, as I'll call it. The hull is on the far left, turret is on the left center, engine is right center, and tracks are far right. Now, the last major differences between the tanks, and it's not even that major, is the speeds and the gear switch time. And we'll get to what that means in just a minute. So for the gear shift time, basically how long it takes to shift between gears is 0.8 seconds for all but the Churchill, in which the Churchill is 1.1. Since they're all manual transmissions, you have to change the gears per your RPM to go faster, and, well, if you can go slower with them, or you can just hit the brakes and then recycle them. The max default speed in general is 24 kilometers per hour for most of them, except for the KV2, which is 23, the Churchill, which is 20, and the Bishop, which is 21. Next, we have the max clips, AP, HE, and smoke. Essentially, this is just the ammo types and how much you have. They're all same across the board, with 20 armor piercing, 50 HE rounds or high explosive rounds, and 45 smoke. Next, we have the armor piercing or AP damage and direct armor pen at 950 and very high. So what this means is, for the very high, to translate that, you can penetrate the front armor of heavy tanks. And with the damage as high as it is, 950, if you notice, that's higher than your health, which means you can one-shot medium tanks and 2-shot heavies if you hit the hull. So you have very powerful armor-piercing rounds. And to finish off the stats with the HE or high explosive damage and armor and explosion armor pen, it's low. They're good for destroying light vehicles, but against actual tanks, you will just bounce off. The HE damage being 590, again, overkill for most vehicles. The explosion radius for all of them is 31 meters, even though they all technically have different calibers. And the munition cost across the board for the commander to actually drop in a tank for a crew is 280 munitions. Now that we've talked about the stats and spent a lot of time on that, let's talk about how you actually use these vehicles. Now, they drive and operate like tanks. So if you've driven tanks before, this part should be pretty simple. You got your speedometer, you got your gear number, things like that, and your crew positions. Some vehicles do come with hull-mounted machine guns where the driver can help against infantry threats, and they have a little box in the bottom right corner where your machine gun is pointed. These are kind of hard to maneuver, but that's that. You obviously have a gunner's position, and you have the spotter's position to help spot targets. Now, in terms of driving and how far you can only go 1,000 meters from which HQ you spawned in. Now, the default that you get at the beginning of every game, they will spawn at the recon tank HQ. Wherever the recon tank is, you'll find the SPA. And you can only go 1,000 meters from that HQ. If the commander drops one at another HQ, you can only go 1,000 meters from that HQ. So just keep that in mind for your distance of how long you can be driving for towards the enemy front line. There is a limit. Now, in terms of the gunner, you'll see very similarly, there is a little chart on the left here. Now, the thing is, though, compared to the regular artillery is, even though you can move, just a little thing, you cannot fire while moving. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. But the main thing is, you can treat this like artillery when you're firing at longer ranges. However, you might have to get up close and personal. which I have developed a chart for this. Now, before we get to the chart though, let's break everything down first. On the left, you have the chart. You'll see 600 meters for 267. Bottom right, you'll have your elevation like the other artillery, except you'll have a plus or minus red number there as well. You'll need to add or subtract that depending on the circumstance. What do I mean by this? Let's take the example of the indirect fire chart. And indirect fire, for what you people need to know, is essentially firing without line of sight. You're firing over stuff. You're not directly firing at a target, as the name kind of suggests. So at the top of the chart, we've got 600 meters, and to get that, we need 267 mils. So we'd raise the gun until we get 267 mils. Here comes where that red number comes into play now. We take plus 29, so you would think that. No, you subtract that from the 267, and you should get 238. It all depends on the elevation and how your gun is facing and where the hull is. That way you know to aim higher or lower. You take, if it's plus, you subtract it. If it's minus, you add to your number. Now, in regards to direct fire, meaning you're up close and personal with them, and you want to get a good reading. Now, if you just aim at the target, your shot's going to be way off. I'm just going to tell you right now, there's no real good way to aim it using the reticle, so you want to use the chart or the calculator I will specifically lay out in the description. So let's take that same example. Say the target is 100 meters away. You have that plus 29. When I use the calculator, what I'll also lay out here, you'll want to be negative 15 mils. So you'll actually have a little bit of gun depression for your shot. That's what you'll need to hit something 100 meters away in that given scenario with the elevation numbers in play. Now, here's the charts I was talking about. These are very simple charts broken down for all of the assault guns. Feel free to pause the video, take screenshots, do whatever. But these are very basic charts. Use the calculator if you're unsure, but these will get you started, if nothing else. One major tidbit to also help you in battle is, if you are the squad leader, is to deploy your outpost or your OP using the watch feature. You can also build garrisons, but they won't help you here. Reason being, if you have your outpost or OP deployed, it'll improve the dispersion or the tightness of your shells in terms of a radius in which they will hit a target. Artillery is the same, but they do not have the ability with the OP to actually help with dispersion, but with the assault guns or self-propelled artillery, it can. We don't know if there's a radius. If you have to be within 50 meters, it'd be advised just to keep your OP by the tank or the self-propelled artillery, just in case. It's good to have anyway near the vehicle, but just know the tightness of your shells will be better than if you didn't have your OP near the tank. Just a couple little tidbits as we finish up the video here. You cannot take out garrisons in either artillery, whether you're static or mobile. The only way you take out any spawn point is essentially by running it over an OP or maybe a half track. But other than that, you really can't take out spawn points with these too much. And with the spotter's position, as I didn't really go over it, it's the same as a tank, essentially. You get up in a position, you are able to look around with very good visibility, so I didn't want to dwell too much on that. I wanted to get the important details. With that in mind, though, if there's anything I did miss, please leave down below. I'll gladly admit to that. This is a video to get you started on a basic level. There's plenty of ways you could play the new artillery loadouts and tanks themselves, and I look forward to seeing how people can develop tactics in the future. But I hope you got something out of the video, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.